I think we're finally at a point where I can confidently say that esports is a sport. Hard workers, big prizes, and huge audiences over the past few years have legitimized esports as an honored form of competition. However, there is something that makes esports inherently different from other types of competition: the age of its player base. I'm not saying that we're all babies, but that the average age of competitors across esports is significantly lower than all other forms of competition. Why is this? Although the physical demand is much lower than traditional sports, it's something much more sinister, keeping competitors from playing late into their careers. Ourselves.
Welcome back to Hot Film. My name is Dominic. My dreams of being esports pro are far behind me. I mean, I never really had a case in the first place, but I mean, I'm too old now to build the mechanical skill and game IQ to compete at the top level. I'm only 21. At the professional level, the average age of competitors are between the ages of 17 and around 30, with most pros between the ages of 20 and 24. So again, that's my exact demographic, but they've had years training, practicing, and getting to that top level to be there. No way I'm starting now. But if you look at these ages, 100 Thieves, 22, EDG, 19, DRX, 20, and Optic, 25. Optic was the oldest team that attended Champions this year. Why are these teams so young? If you look at a sports league like the NBA, the average age of its players, which is a very physically demanding and mentally demanding sport, is between the ages of 24 and 29, with a lot of its pros peaking between the ages of 29 and 30. Only 6 of the 80 players that attended Champions this year were in that range, with only a handful considered at the top of their game. Why is Valorant, and by extension esports, such a young sport? Today I want to dive into esports players and why they peak when they peak. How can we as a community improve the longevity of our players?
I want to preface this by saying that I was heavily inspired by a series of articles written by Nero on HLTV going in depth on when Counter-Strike players peak, as well as an expert opinion as to why this happens. The article looks at a 2014 study looking at the cognitive capabilities of StarCraft players, finding that the player's cognitive motor function begins to decrease at the age of 24. StarCraft and other esports are very mentally and cognitively taxing, requiring a lot of quick thinking and fast reactions. Using this data as a starting point, the author sought to generate a time frame for the average player's prime, using additional context from stats from HLTV's top 20 players over the past 7 years to back up their claims. After generating some plots using kill per rounds as an indicator for skill, and plotting that against age, he found that there was a strong correlation that between the ages of 20 and 24, the average player is performing at their highest level. Although there are players able to compete at all ages, around the age of 24, a lot of players begin to fall off from their quote-unquote peak. Every team that's won a CSGO major has had an average age between 20 and 24, corroborating this idea, with the exception of NIP and Gambit, with average ages of 25 and 27 respectively. Of the 3 main roles in CS, riflers, oppers, and IGLs, riflers occupy the widest range as the kind of standard role. Oppers are the highest density between ages 20 and 24, correlating this necessity for peak reaction and focus time, and very few IGLs are below the age of 23. IGL is the least cognitively intensive role and requires the most experience to perform at the highest level. The author also does talk about oddities in the community. The GOAT himself, Simple, has passed his prime years and is now 24, but he doesn't seem to be slowing down as he's the #1 ranked player in the most recent top 20 and on the 4th best team at the moment. You also have Kerrigan, a 32-year-old IGL who just led his team to back-to-back-to-back tournaments with the Intel Extreme Masters, ESL Pro Tournament, and the Antwerp Major just this past year. These players don't typically fit the mold, but every sport has their outlier. LeBron James started the NBA out of high school at 18 in 2003, fast forward to 2022, and he's still considered a top 10 player in the NBA. I'm 21 and I torqued my shoulder playing basketball for 1 hour. There are oddities in every sport, but at least in CSGO, you can confidently say that most players peak during this time. These were the findings from the first article, and at a glance, they do seem valid. Cross-referencing this with Valorant, we can see that the average age of top teams fall within this exact range. But something bothered me on the initial read. He based his findings off the fact that cognition motor function is the limiter to a player's skill. And sure, there's a high requirement for reaction time in games like Valorant, but clearly Formula 1 drivers react to situations driving at 300 kilometers an hour, so that's also pretty demanding, and they have competitive drivers that are 35 plus, so if that isn't the limiting factor to players' prime, what is? And this is where the second article that I want to highlight reflects on this, because in reality, there is a ton more factors exclusive to esports scene that influences a player's peak. The panel of experts brought on to speak about this matter points to additional stresses that come with competing in esports. Researchers at the University of Winchester found that esports athletes report significantly lower sleep quality and higher depression scores when compared to non-athlete samples. They found extremely strong correlations between stressors were sourcing from poor sleep quality, burnout, and social phobia anxiety. So despite what the public thinks, esports is more demanding than most traditional sports. Not physically, but mentally. Heavy workloads, learning the work-life balance, financial stability, and the constant need for adaptation through metas are all factors that are mental burdens to every player in every game. At age 19-20, you can keep your mind focused and fresh, but the older you get, the more you have to worry about work efficiency. With a majority of the community without professional assistance with good diets, sports psychologists, and more discrete working hours, players are getting burnt out. It doesn't help that players don't have consistent spots on their rosters and sometimes aren't even getting paid. Sure, it's not a torn ACL, but it feels pretty bad. But that doesn't mean it's the end of esports as we know it. With an increased professionalism in esports and teams having resources, players can actually maintain a healthy career. There will always be stresses affecting players, and Father Time will always win, but using proper resources to eliminate some of the dangers of self-inflicting stresses, for example, sleeping, overworking, and diet, experts predict that we'll see players staying in their primes later into their career. And we're actually already starting to see this, especially in a more modern esports like Valorant. Players are able to find a work-life balance with the more scheduled VCT circuit with an off-season so that players have time to relax. Instead of mortgaging their future solely on the success of their team, they can stream, make content, and coach for more supplemental income. And as esports grow, teams will be more willing to hire support staff, like NRG's sports psychologist is just one example of this. Teams are taking steps to preserve their players instead of just wringing them out for all they're worth. In esports, the age that you compete at is not as important as it may seem. Instead, what's more important indicator is how long you've been playing for. Mileage is hugely important. It's huge mental tax that spends months grinding and developing your game, only for a few new patches to come up, new maps, new agents, and the meta forces you to relearn everything. Meanwhile, there's always going to be a younger player that doesn't need to worry about taxes, that's always on your heels. Doing this for years, sometimes with no tangible results, is what causes burnout in such high numbers. To succeed at a high level, it's much more important to be driven than it is to be young.
Although esports will always be a younger scene, video games are just a younger hobby, there has been historically some esports old men dedicated to their craft that have been able to produce at the top level very, very late into their career, or at least what's considered late for an esports perspective. Let's take a look at some of them and kind of understand how they do it.
Mango is the greatest Super Smash Bros. Melee player of all time. He's been competing for over 15 years now, winning his first major in 2008 at the age of 16, and ranking top 10 every active year since. He's been considered the best player in the world through the periods of 2008-2010, 2013-2014, and has been in title contentions from 2019 to 2022. Although he goes through droughts, placing 4th in 2015 and 5th in 2017, as low as 11th during the summer of 2022, I think he's probably going to rank number 3 or 2 now though, he's always continued to play and find motivation. This year, at age 30 and with 15 years of competing, he has already won majors like Smash Summit 14, Lost Tech City, and famously dominating Super Smash Con 2022 after getting that 11th place ranking during the summer.
You're back. These little every time. How many times does one man have to prove himself? They tell me I suck, I come out, I suck for a while. I'm always guaranteed, baby, to come back and win.
Again, he's projected to place in top 3 in 2022, cementing him as not only the greatest Melee player of all time for his longevity and consistency, but one of the best esports players of all time.
Taxes, death, Mango winning a tournament. I'll be 85, I'm winning a tournament before I go out. All of you. You know exactly who you are.
Faker is another player that may not be old, only 26, but has been at the top of the League of Legends scene for the past 10 years. Elevating to the top of the Korean League scene back in 2013, a 16-year-old Faker proved to be one of the greatest players to ever pick up the game. He led his team SKTT1 to the League World Champions in 2013, 2015, and 2016. Not only being the only team to win back-to-back world titles, but the only team to ever win multiple titles. However, 10 years of dominance is difficult for any League player. With its vast player base and competitive ecosystem, staying at the top for more than a few years is difficult. Yet Faker proves that he could still lead his team back to the top, returning to the finals in 2022, just falling short of DRX. Although his role has changed over the years, he remains a top player despite other players around him ascending and have falling off in that time. His drive for the game is unparalleled, and despite him competing in the hardest region for over a decade, his dominance will never be replicated and is still going on to this day. Daigo is the final boss for old men in esports. He has been competing in fighting games, mainly Street Fighter, since their prominence in the 90s. Daigo began his career at 13 and has competed actively over the past 25 years. He is a 6-time EVO champion and has been considered the best in multiple games throughout his career. Even in his late 30s, he was considered a top 10 player in Street Fighter V during the years of 2016 to 2019. This guy is so accomplished, he has a manga series based on his life. Famously, Tokido, the widely considered best player in the world during that period, said he would only accept the title if he could beat Daigo in a first to 10. Accepting his challenge, Daigo wiped the floor with him in a title match. This just goes to show how much respect he has in the community, and even at the age of 41, a player can still continue to be successful with his drive to compete. These players are the perfect intersection of performance and mentality that keep them playing for so long at such a high level, but not all players have this mentality, nor should they be expected to. Players are people, and mental health of players can be tough, especially if you're playing the game for 10 plus hours a day just to keep your head above the competitive water.
So how old is too old for Valorant? I guess as we learned today, you're really never too old as long as your drive to compete is still there. We've seen top players in our region, for example, FNS is competing at the age of 30, which sure doesn't seem that old to a lot of people, but in terms of esports, he's been competing for a long time, both in CS and in Valorant. Although we can very clearly pinpoint the peak and longevity of careers as they are right now, we don't know where they'll go in the future, and hopefully we'll be able to extend them with the additions of things like additional support systems and better tournament infrastructure. Now, there'll always be anomalies that prove and push how old you can be in esports, but they should not be the golden standard, expecting most players to play like this. Instead, we need a bottom-up approach to improve the well-beings of our players. And as for me, I guess it's not too late for me to become a pro player. Thanks again for watching another Off the Dome. I'll see you guys later. Catch me on the leaderboards.